Hello, my name is Evgeny Soloducha, and today we will talk about React.js. What is React.js? React is a JavaScript library, one of the most popular ones with over 100,000 stars on GitHub. React is not a framework, unlike Angular. React is an open source project created by Facebook. React is used to build user interfaces on the front end. React is the view layer of an MVC application. The most important features in React are JSX components and props, state, handling events, and keys. What is JSX? JSX is a syntax extension to JavaScript, and fundamentally it is a syntactic sugar for the React createElement function. JSX code on the slide compiles to React createElement function. Now about components and props. React is all about components. Components let you split the user interfaces into independent reusable pieces and think about each piece in isolation. This page provides an introduction to the idea of components. Conceptually, components are like JavaScript functions. They accept arbitrary inputs called props and return React elements describing what should appear on the screen. The simplest way to define a component is to write a JavaScript function as one as on the slide. This function is a valid React component because it accepts a single props, which stands for properties, object argument with data and returns a React element. You can also use an ES6 class to define a component as on the slide. When React sees an element representing a user-defined component, it passes JSX attributes and children to this component as a single object. For example, this code renders Hello Sarah on the page. In this example, we call React DOM-render with the welcome name Sarah element. React calls the welcome component with object name Sarah as the props. Our welcome component returns a Hello Sarah element as the result. React DOM efficiently updates the DOM to match Hello Sarah. By React conversion, component names should start with a capital letter. Components can refer to other components in their output. This lets us use the same component abstraction for any level of detail. A button, a form, a dialog, a screen in React apps, all those are commonly expressed as components. For example, as you see on the slide, we can create an app component that renders welcome many times. Typically, new React apps have a single app component at the very top. However, if you integrate React into an existing app, you might start bottom up with a small component like button and gradually work your way to the top of the view hierarchy. In components, props are read-only. Whether you declare a component as a function or a class, it must never modify its own props. Consider this sum function. Such functions are called pure because they do not attempt to change their inputs and always return the same result for the same inputs. React is pretty flexible, but it has a single strict rule. All React components must act like pure functions with respect to their props. Of course, application user interfaces are dynamic and change over time. In the next section, we will introduce a new concept of state. State allows React components to change their output over time in response to user actions, network responses, and anything else without violating this rule. What is state in React.js? The state is a built-in React object that is used to contain data or information about the component. A component's state can change over time. Whenever it changes, the component renders. The change in state can happen as a response to user action or system-generated events, and these changes determine the behavior of the component and how it will render. A state can be modified based on user action or network changes. Every time the state of an object changes, React re-renders the component to the browser. The state object is initialized in the constructor. The state object can store multiple properties. This setState function is used to change the value of the state object. SetState function performs a shallow merge between the new and the previous state. What is the difference between state and props? Props, short for properties, and state are both plain JavaScript objects, while both hold information that influences the output of render. They are different in one important way. Props get passed to the component, similar to function parameters, whereas state is managed within the component, similar to variables declared within a function. The state method. State can be updated in response to event handlers, server responses, or prop changes. This is done using the setState method. The setState method enqueues all of the updates made to the component's state and instruct React to render the component and its children with the updated state. Handling events with React elements is very similar to handling events on DOM elements. There are some syntax differences. React events are named using camel case rather than lowercase. With JS6, you pass a function as the event handler rather than a string. For example, the HTML is slightly different in React. Another difference is that you cannot return false to prevent default behavior in React. You must call prevent default explicitly. When using React, you generally don't need to call add event listener to add listeners to a DOM element after it is created. Instead, just provide a listener when the element is initially rendered. Keys help React identify which items have changed, are added, or are removed. Keys should be given to the elements inside the array to give the elements a stable identity. The best way to pick a key is to use a string that uniquely identifies a list item among its siblings. Most often, you would use IDs from your data as keys. React is the primary way to build big, fast web apps with JavaScript. It has scaled very well for Facebook and Instagram. Thank you.